Hello everyone, this is me again, Edgar Dupansalado Engineer, and I know this is an overdue promise from my previous vlog, but this time I'll be sharing how I would study for board exam. So for this content, I'll be talking about how I created my schedule back then, also how I would solve problems and set targets, and of course, some things that I think you should look forward about the licensure exam. And without further ado, let's start with creating my schedule. And actually guys, eto talaga yung pinakauna kong ginawa before our review classes started. And what I basically did was to list down all the daily activities that I think I should be doing for the next 5 months of our stay in Cebu. And I specifically allotted time as to how many hours I should be spending for each activity. So when you create your own schedule, I think the two things that you should consider is that 1, it should be specific, and 2, it should be time-bound. Specific in a way that you have already identified all the activities that you should be consistently and routinely doing, and time-bound so that you can give balance not only to your study habits but also to other aspects of your personal life. For the meantime, allow me to share with you yung naging personal schedule ko way back when I was reviewing for the board exam. So as you can see in your screens, ito yung naging guide ko as to what I should be doing during the weekdays, and I even included the days when I should be doing my laundry. But as for the weekends, I don't have specific schedule because I reserve it for personal and spiritual kind of things like treating ourselves and spending our respective me times after exams on Saturdays and attending church and life groups on Sundays. But since nagre-review nga ako, spending more time to study was really my top priority. So back then, I would study from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 6 in the evening, and I would take a short break to have my dinner and wash up. And I would resume studying from 7:30 until 9:45 in the evening, plus the recapping I do every morning of what I studied the other day. So all in all, I would study for more or less than 7 hours in a day, but it would sometimes actually extend depending on the topic being discussed for the day or its level of difficulty. However, I never pulled an entire night just to study because guys, when you're already preparing for the board exam, it's not only your mind that you should be taking good care of, but your physical health as well. So you better have time to rest and sleep. And seriously guys, there's nothing to be proud of by telling everyone that you haven't slept the other night just because you studied all night long. So please don't ever do that and never compromise your health. That is why you have to picture out from the very start of how your routine would be like during the review proper. And I think that is the power of having a schedule because it keeps you on track of what you should be accomplishing in a day. So much for my schedule, let's jump to how I would solve problems. And actually guys, yung pinakauna kong ginagawa noon, whether I was studying or taking an exam, was to have a very quick run through of the given set of problems so that I'll be able to know what the topic is all about for each problem. And from there, I would decide which problems to solve first. So when it comes to solving a set of problems, I would usually skip the harder ones and solve for the easier ones first. Because guys, if you think about it, it also takes time even when you are just solving a problem that you think is easy. Not to mention the formulas that you have to apply, and also you have to be extra careful in analyzing the problems because there are some problems that are quite tricky na even just a single word or phrase, it alters the meaning of the problem that you thought it was. Though I have once tried na inuuna muna yung mahihirap na problems, but in my experience, my focus would be set to eagerly solve those problems to the point na nakakalimutan ko or hindi ko namamalayan yung oras. And I had this tendency to panic once malapit nang maubos yung oras. So yung mga easy problems na yon is napabayaan ko, and needless to say, it cost me lose points. But I don't want to limit you guys as to which problems to solve first because there are some people who are so comfortable na inuuna muna yung mga mahihirap na problems. So whatever works for you, I think you just continue doing it and keep mastering that because it's already part of your system. But you have to remember that the board exam is not only a test of accuracy but also of your speed in answering all those problems in the given time duration. So, you have to be very time conscious. Sometimes naman when I study, I am tempted to look for the answers key and I tend to memorize the solution step by step. However, I don't encourage this because understanding the principles and concepts behind every problem should be your basic foundation. And what do I mean by this? For example, if you completely understand Archimedes' principle, which states that the buoyant force on a submerged object is equal to the weight of the fluid that is being displaced by the object, then this formula would automatically be imprinted on your mind, and once you encounter a problem that deals with buoyancy, I am confident that you will be able to solve it, whatever the framework of that problem is. I think that is also the advantage of understanding the principles well, because it allows you to memorize less formulas. Especially guys in surveying, there are some formulas that are pure trigonometry. So if you don't understand the basic trigonometric functions, mahihirapan ka talaga and you would resort to just memorize. But I don't say not to memorize at all, because there are some problems na formula-based na lang talaga yung pag-solve. Especially guys in hydraulics and geotechnical engineering, marami dun talaga yung problems na formula lang yung gagamitin, and if you keep deriving them, it might consume your time. So it's okay to memorize as long as you are able to grasp the concept of that problem and you are able to relate the formula or the solution to that concept. In other words, in solving problems, it should answer the questions of what, why, and how. First, you have to ask yourself what the problem is all about, and why and how this method or formula is applicable for the problem. Now, let's move on to how I would set targets. But before I go into details, let me just share a little background on how our review classes had taken place. Because in our review program, we actually had two terms, namely, the review term and the refresher. And during the review term, yung naging mode of instruction namin was just the traditional one, wherein there would be discussions of different topics from MSTE, HGE, and SEC on weekdays, and every Saturday would be our weekly evaluation exam. And we had to keep up with all of those in 3 months' time, starting from June until the first week of September. Meanwhile, our refresher started around mid of September, and every week there would be 3 days set for discussions and 3 days set for exams. And our discussions would be based from the exams we'd had in the previous week. So basically, refresher was just an 8-week series of exams, but yung fourth and last exam namin, yung naging simulations namin of the actual board exam setting, wherein yung review center namin nag-rent talaga ng isang school para magkaroon kami ng mga room assignments, at kunwari may mga notice of applications and examinee numbers din kami. And take note guys, during that time we also had to wear the required dress codes and bring the necessary materials that are according to the PRC guidelines. But going back to the review term, I would only study depending on the topics being discussed for the day, because every after class we would be given modules that we could practice on. So when it comes to setting of targets as to how many problems I should solve in a day, it would only depend on the given set of problems in our modules, and I was not the type of reviewee who would aim to solve like 200 problems a day, because I wanted to focus more on understanding every problem as to its concept and principle. And actually guys, there are some problems that already introduce several topics which can test my prior knowledge and how much I've already learned from the discussions. So it's like hitting two birds with one stone, because these types of problems could be solved by applying several methods. So back then, I would think of our review term as the best time to strengthen my foundation and to identify the areas that I needed to work on in preparation for our refresher. Meanwhile, I would consider refresher as the major test that measured how much we had learned from our review term, because sabi ko nga kanina, refresher was just basically an 8-week series of exams. So what I did with regards to setting of targets was to solve past board problems from the Civil Engineering reference books of Sir Gilisania. I used the volume 2 for Mathematics, Surveying, and Transportation Engineering, while volumes 3 and 4 naman yung ginamit ko for Hydraulics and Geotechnical Engineering and for Structural Engineering and Construction. And I had actually scheduled them as well kung anong past board problems yung isosolve ko from each volume. For instance, for 1 week, I would solve past board problems from 2000 to 2005 for MSTE, along with the recently concluded boards for HGE and SEC at that time. But disclaimer lang, it was actually recommended by one of our instructors in the review center, and it was way back November 2017. So the trend of the board exam in our time versus yours might be completely different, because it always depends on who the Board of Examiners is. Anyway, let's now talk about some things that you should expect regarding the exam. And the very first thing that I really want to share with you is to expect the unexpected, because guys, it really happens. And during my time, I would say that MSTE was my forte next to HGE. And as far as I could remember, hindi bumababa yung score ko sa 85% during the refresher. But when the board exam results were out already, unfortunately, yun yung naging lowest rating ko, and unfortunately again, naging line of 7 pa siya. But on the brighter side naman, yung SEC na madalas akong makakuha ng below 75 na rating is tumaas-taas siya above 75. And just to show you, here is the board rating I got. And actually guys, nagdalawang isip talaga ako kung ipapakita ko to, kasi some of you might think na ang lakas-lakas ko namang mag-share about this and that, pero eto lang pala yung score na nakuha ko. Pero just to tell you guys, after the board exam, na-feel ko talaga na mababa yung score ko sa MSTE, and I did not even expect na makakakuha ko ng 74%. Because imagine guys, when I was taking the exam for that subject, 2 hours na yung lumipas, hindi pa ako nangangalahati sa sure na answers ko. Nahirapan talaga ako at medyo nanhinayang because days prior the board exam, we were actually given modules to study on, and it contained really tough MSTE problems, as in pan out of this world. And I did not expect na may mga similar problems pala doon na lalabas sa board exam. So, yung iba, yung ginawa nila, they tried noting some keywords and just memorized the answer. At ako naman, I did not bother even to try solving at all, because at that time, I was already equipped. Feeling ko totally equipped na ako at hindi ko na yun may sisingit pa sa utak ko. So, I just focus on what I knew. And I didn't want to feel na parang naghahabol. Pero I hope maging lesson din to for you guys, especially if you are a future taker, na whatever the review center is giving to you, make sure to give time for that, and malay natin, lalabas din yun sa board exam nyo, di ba? Also, what you should watch out for in the exam are the erroneous problems. And actually guys, when I was taking the exam, I was tempted to shade the none of the above box, but then when I tried box solving, it made me thought that maybe the PRC is just testing us on how deeply we understand the problem. But I just want to clarify here that box solving is not always applicable. It is more applicable on the situational problems wherein hindi repetitive yung paggamit ng choices. Meaning to say, if a situational problem contains 3 questions, meaning yung isang choice lang dapat yung pwedeng magamit for these other 2 questions para masolve mo to, yung dalawa na to. Pero, hindi na yun applicable if the 4 choices of this have also corresponding answers to the remaining other questions. So you really have to be very careful on that if you are trying to solve a situational problem na you think applicable yung box solving. And the last thing that I think you should expect as the exam is getting near is that feeling of being not ready because you were not able to cover all the topics for the board exam. But I think that is the mutual feeling for everyone who really prepared, because guys, if you did not prepare at all, I think your mindset would be bahala ni si Batman, or you keep on believing that it is impossible to compress all those years you spent in your undergrad in 6 months time. So you just believe in your instincts and depend on your stock knowledge. However, I want to tell you guys that no one really knows what will come out in the exam. So every single step that you take to ace the board exam really counts. I just want to emphasize it here that when it comes to passing the board exam, it only requires you to do one thing, and that is to give your all. And giving your all means doing your part as a reviewee and putting your best foot forward, because once you fail, you may think at one point that everything was just a waste of time, money, and effort. But the truth is your determination remains, and you can always work it out and use it again as an advantage to improve the next time you try. It's okay to feel tired and sluggish at very rare times. Pero sabi nga nila, if you are tired, learn to rest but not to give up. And always set your eyes on the prize that is coming. And that is your license as a civil engineer. So that would be all for this vlog, and I hope you get insights from my experience and at the same time they motivated you to ace the board exam. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you all again in the next vlog. So keep safe everyone.